Hi, welcome back to the channel. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about what's happening in the Russian economy and specifically to talk about Russian gold because Russia is selling its gold at the fastest rate at any time since the war in Ukraine started. Now, I think gold is an interesting topic. It's not something that we've talked about a lot on the channel, but everybody thinks of gold as being highly valuable and highly desirable. And I think one of the reasons for this is that it first became a currency over 5,000 years ago. It was one of the first things that was used as an actual coin to trade things. And so since that time, it's been seen as being desirable. And one of the reasons for that is because it's rare, it's very expensive to mine, it doesn't rust, it doesn't tarnish, and basically everybody likes it. It just feels nice. It's the sort of thing that people like to hold. So it's a valuable, rare commodity. And Russia, because it's the largest country in the world, has very large reserves of gold. If we have a look at this graphic, it shows the countries with the largest reserves in the world. And you can see that Russia is right at the top here with over 12,000 metric tons of unmined gold, with an estimated value of at around $4,000 per ounce of over 1.68 trillion US dollars. That is a lot of money. Australia is a close second with a similar amount, around 12,000 metric tons, followed by South Africa, which has 5,000, Indonesia 3,800, Canada 3,200, China 3,100, USA has 3,000, Peru 2,500, and Brazil 2,400. That's the top 9. If you want to finish the top 10, it's Kazakhstan with 2,300. Now, these are the unmined gold reserves, so it doesn't take into account how much it would cost to actually mine that gold and how difficult it is to access it. If we have a look at the countries with the largest reserves of gold, so this is gold that's actually been produced that's sitting in nice gold bars, you can see that the USA has the largest reserves with over 8,100 tons. Germany has the second largest, 3,300. Italy comes in at number 3, followed by France. And Russia officially has the 5th largest reserves in the world. But the reserves are actually going down because Russia is selling to keep the war in Ukraine going. Now, just before we go on any further today, I want to talk to you about today's sponsor, Strawberry.me, because the best investment that you can ever make is in yourself. And Strawberry.me offers qualified online coaching services. Now, I've been using this for the past 6 months or so. I've got a coach called Kremlin, and I found it to be invaluable because coaching isn't therapy. This isn't trying to work out all of your problems. This is actually you becoming more focused, setting goals, keeping on whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. Over the past 6 months, you may have noticed that I've launched a new channel. I've launched a second channel. Now, initially, that channel was focused on travel. However, through the meetings that I've had with Colleen and talking about what I'm looking to achieve, what I'm enjoying, what I want to do with my life, I've now morphed that into a food channel. And that definitely would not have happened if I wasn't using the coaching services. So if you're interested in using Strawberry.me for online coaching services, then either scan the QR code on the screen now or click the link in the description below and you'll get 50% off your first coaching session. So if we talk about Russia's gold reserves, they're currently sitting at 2,330 metric tons, which has an estimated value of around about $350 billion. So that's obviously significant. And the reason why this is important to Russia is because at the start of the war, a lot of its overseas assets were frozen. And gold is not something that's easy to freeze. It doesn't sit in somebody else's bank. Most of the Russian gold is sitting in a secret reserve somewhere in Russia. It might be in the Kremlin. It might not be. Nobody really knows where those gold bars are stored. So it's valuable because nobody else can take it off you. Now, obviously, you need to be able to convert it into currency to use it. You can't eat gold. You can't actually use gold in a war in Ukraine. You have to sell it and then convert it to cash and then use that cash to do things with it. Now, at the start of the war, it was recorded that Russia had 405 metric tons of gold in its national wealth fund. And this was the fund that's used basically to fund deficits in the Russian economy. Today, the National Wealth Fund is holding 173 tons. So that means that more than 230 tons of gold has been sold from the National Wealth Fund since 2022. That represents 57% of the reserves that were at the start of the war. But it's not just the National Wealth Fund reserves that Russia is now selling. The central bank recently confirmed that in October 25, it sold 3.1 tons of gold with an estimated value of around $400 million. And the reason why it's doing that isn't because this is in the normal course of business. It's because Russia is running short of cash and now needs to start selling some of its assets to get more money. As we saw earlier in the video, Russia has the largest gold reserves in the world, unmined reserves, and it's mining around 330 tons of gold per year. It's the second or third largest producer in the world. And in terms of monetizing the gold, it does this in a number of different ways. Firstly, there are domestic sales. So it sells gold for rubles to domestic banks. There are foreign sales to countries that are still allowed to trade with Russia. So they include the United Arab Emirates, China, and Turkey. There's also bars that are melted down to hide the Russian origin. So they take off the original Russian stamps and then make them more difficult to trace. So you can trade those in the international black markets. Gold is also used as collateral for loans from non-Western banks. So if Russia is borrowing money from other countries, it can use gold as basically the security behind it. But the problem with using gold is that it's a one-off reserve. Once you've actually taken it out of the ground, made it into bars and then sold it, it's gone forever. So Russia currently is funding its economy through the sale of gold, but this can't last forever. So what's the summary and conclusion today? Well, I wanted to post this video because I've had a lot of comments from people recently saying Russia is now using its gold reserves to supplement the shortfall in income coming from oil and gas. And I think what we've seen in today's video is that Russia does have a huge supply of gold under the ground. So it's got the largest unmined reserves in the world. Well, similar figure to Australia. I think it's nip and tuck between the two countries. And it's mining around 330 tons of that gold every single year. And what we've seen in today's video is that Russia is now monetizing that gold. So it's sold a huge amount of its gold from its national wealth fund. Over half of all of the gold held at the start of the war has now been liquidated, and that cash has been used for the war in Ukraine. And the Russian central bank is now also selling gold on a monthly basis to make up some of the shortfall on its financial budget. So Russia is now having to dip into its gold reserves. And this tells us that the Russian economy is under real strain because you want to keep those reserves. If you look at wealthy countries, they are building their gold reserves. They are not depleting them. They're not selling basically the bank, which is the gold in the past used to be behind all of your currency. So a long time ago in countries, you would have an equivalent amount of gold stored away to match all of the money that you'd issued in your economy. But most countries have now stopped doing that because they've issued far too much cash. They simply don't have enough gold. And if you're in the UK, you may remember that Gordon Brown actually sold off a lot of the UK's gold when he was in charge. And unfortunately, the UK's never really recovered from that. So gold is seen as being a sign of strength. If you're building gold reserves, then basically you're building your wealth. And what Russia is doing at the moment is the complete opposite. It is now selling all of its gold. It's cashing in on all of those supplies to keep the war in Ukraine going. Now, as we've talked about many times before, there is no long-term upside for the war in Ukraine. It's not like Russia is selling its gold to invest into artificial intelligence or in developing some new product that's going to be hugely beneficial to the economy in the long term. It's basically cashing in its reserves, and then that money is dead money. It's going to the war in Ukraine, and there's no future income or employment generation or anything that's going to supplement the economy in the future. So what we're seeing here is Russia now starting to run down its natural resources and natural reserves. And of course, with things like gold mining, you tend to mine the easiest seams first. So you go for the areas where gold is easily accessible. And as you mine that gold, it can become more challenging to actually find future gold and more expensive, and therefore puts more strain in terms of how much you can actually access. Because the 12,000 tons that are sitting under the ground in Russia aren't easily accessible. They can't just switch on a tap and suddenly decide to double the amount of gold that they're producing to keep funding the economy. It becomes more expensive and more difficult the longer a mine goes on. So Russia selling all of its proven reserves, the actual gold that's been converted into bars, is a short-term boost to the economy, but long-term, it's going to weaken the strength of Russia, because if you've got lots and lots of gold tucked away like the USA has, then that is money for a rainy day. If something happens down the road, then you can dip into that, sell some gold in the markets if you need to, and then replenish it at some point in the future. But what we're seeing in Russia right now is they are constantly chipping away at their reserves of gold. Now, they're fifth highest in the world at the moment in terms of those reserves, but if they keep selling, then they will no longer be in the top 5. They possibly could fall out of the top 10. And that will put more pressure on the mining industry at a time when all Russian companies are facing severe sanctions. So those mining businesses will be struggling to access technology and be able to deal with companies that they have done historically in order to make sure that their mining equipment is state of the art and at the cutting edge. So as we see those industries starting to suffer in Russia, it will make it even more difficult to take more gold out of the ground and to keep up productivity and cost effectiveness. So we're likely to see the cost of Russian gold increasing in terms of how much it costs to take it out of the ground and make it into gold bullion. And this is coming at a time when it's now becoming a more important ingredient in the financial makeup of Russia. So the overall summary of today's video is that Russia, now that it's seeing a huge impact on its oil and gas sales, is having to turn to its other major reserve, gold. It's been cashing in on the gold reserves that Russia has since the war in Ukraine started. That is now accelerating. The gold is being sold at a faster rate. The National Wealth Fund reserves are down to less than half of where they were at the start of the war. The Russian central bank is now also selling gold. And all of this is going to put pressure on the long-term value of the Russian economy. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's video. You found it useful, informative, and thought-provoking. If you've liked what I've said, then please give me a thumbs up. Thank you for watching this video all the way through to the end, and thank you so much to everyone that's supported me. If you bought me a coffee or sent me a YouTube super thanks or signed up as a Patreon or a YouTube member or buy me a coffee member, really appreciate that support. Thank you so much. And here's something to put a smile on your face.